Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another chapter of The Fires of Merlin. This is part of the Lost Years of Merlin series by T.A. Barron, and every night we are reading a chapter aloud of the books in order. So this is chapter 17 called Powerless. In the last chapter, it was pretty short, but they came across the slaughtered dragon eggs of Valdirg. And it was a pretty gruesome sight. And then Valdirg actually came and attacked, and Merlin went into a little cavern to protect himself. And then the last sentence was, "Then, without warning, something brushed against my leg." So this is chapter 17, called Powerless. Okay. I drew back in fright. Grasping the hilt of my sword, I struggled to wrench it from the scabbard. But the scabbard's mouth had been so caked with mud that the blade refused to come free. Hunched beneath the low ceiling, I pulled and pulled without success. Hurl myself from the cavern, now while I still could, before whatever had stirred did so again. Yet I hesitated. Beyond the grassy curtain, Valdirg himself might well be waiting for me. Again I tugged at my sword. Again it failed to move. Suddenly, a sound like I had never heard before echoed in the darkness. Part moan, part snarl, part whimper, it grew louder until at last it abruptly died away. I pressed myself against the earthen wall. Mud oozed down my neck, but I did not stir. I barely breathed. Yet the rancid smell assaulted me, stronger than ever. I could only hope that this creature, whatever it was, might just ignore me and leave. Then, very gradually, a faint orange glow began to illuminate the cavern. At first I could not tell where it originated, for its flickering caused strange, ungainly shadows to grow and wither on the walls. Giants stalking, snakes writhing, trees crashing to the ground. Finally, though, I located the source. A triangle of orange light, not far above the floor of the cavern's far end. The light flickered, quavering like a candle in a breeze. Though fear gripped me, I did the only thing I could think to do. With both hands, I scooped a chunk of mud off the floor, pressed it into a ball, and hurled it straight at the glowing triangle. A splat, and instantly the light went out. At the same time, the whining, moaning sound returned, this time swelling so loud that I had to cover my ears. I wriggled closer to the rear wall. All at once, the entire wall shifted behind me. Mud poured over my head. For an instant, I thought the riverbank was about to collapse on top of me. Yet the earthen wall did not collapse. Instead, it did the one thing I least expected. It breathed. Shaking with effort, the whole surface drew a slow, halting breath. Foul-smelling wind rushed over me, swirling around the enclosure. Heedless of Valdirg, I rolled to the curtain of drenched grasses, hoping to escape in time. Just as I was about to roll out of the cavern, back into the churning waters outside, the long breath choked off. As abruptly as it had started, it ceased. It was, I felt sure, one of the last breaths, if not the very last, of something at the edge of death, or dead at last. Pausing at the entrance, I studied the path of a single shaft of light, as crimson as the setting sun, that slit the cavern from the place where my shoulder had pushed apart the grasses. It landed on the spot where I had seen the glowing triangle. My heart froze. For there, tilted on its side in the black mud, lay an enormous head, twice the size of the head of a full-grown horse. It belonged to a dragon. Its eye, whose eerie light had filled the cavern only a moment before, was now shut. Long lashes rimmed the eyelid. I could see, clinging to the lashes, a few fragments of broken shell. A dull yellow bump protruded from the forehead, while lavender scales ran down the full length of the wrinkly nose. Dozens of teeth, as sharp as daggers, glistened within the half-open jaws. Curiously, only the left ear flopped limply on the mud. The right ear, silvery blue in color, stretched stiffly into the air like a misplaced horn. A sudden rush of pity filled me. What vision of terror, I wondered, had driven this beautiful young hatchling from its egg and into hiding in this hollow. My skin tingled as I recalled the movement of the great body against my back, movement that was probably its final stirring of life. An inexplicable instinct made me guess that this dragon had been female. If so, she would never have the chance to lay any eggs of her own. Reaching up, I pulled out several handfuls of grass that hung over the entrance. More crimson light filtered into the cavern. Probing with my second sight, I spied a pair of sharp claws, flecked with purple, protruding from the mud. Not far from the place where I had momentarily rested, a tail with 2 hooked barbs lay coiled. Turning back to the head, I smiled sadly at the irrepressible ear. Nothing, not even death, could make it lie down. I wondered about the dragon's wounds. Had she starved to death? Bled from some fatal gashes I could not see? Or, like any abandoned child, simply suffered from sorrow and fear until she finally died? At that moment, another deep moan, weaker than before, rose within the cavern. Still alive! The dragon's immense bulk shuddered, shaking the earthen floor. Clumps of mud dropped from above, splattering my head and shoulders. Her eye opened, barely a sliver, fluttered, then closed once again, but not before I caught its look of anguish. Biting my lip, I hesitated. Then, slowly, very slowly, I crawled closer. Gingerly, I lay my open hand over the eye, stroking its delicate lashes. It did not open again. Ever so gently, I moved my hand down the lavender scales of the nose, stopping at the immense nostrils. My whole hand barely covered them. A faint flutter of warm air warmed my fingers, reminding me of that horse from my childhood, whose name I could no longer recall, but whose misty breath I had never forgotten. But the breath of this creature, I could tell, was rapidly fading. Yet, what if a tiny spark of life still remained? Maybe I could. But no, I had no more magic. My jaw clenched as I cursed Arnalda's treachery. Had she not stolen my gifts, I might have been able to call upon the sky above and the soil below, sources of the power of binding, which could knit together the threads of the cosmos and heal even the deepest wound. Limply, my hand slid from the dragon's nose. I could not call upon that power, or any others. Nor could I do anything for this wretched beast. Helpless. I sighed, feeling more than ever the aching emptiness within my chest. Something tugged against my hand. One of the dragon's scales had caught on the vine bracelet that Rhea had given me as we parted. Even in the dying light, the bracelet shone with a lustrous green. What had she said as she tied it to my wrist? This will remind you of all the life around you and the life within yourself. I closed my eyes, hearing her voice again. The life within yourself. Yet, what use was that to anyone else? Almost out of habit, I reached into my leather satchel and pulled out a handful of herbs. Rubbing my palms together, I crushed them as best I could. Instantly, the scents of rowan bark, beechroot, and silver balm enriched the rancid air of the cavern. Then, with effort, I pulled off one of my boots. Using it as a makeshift bowl, I dropped in the herbs, gathering them at the heel. I squeezed some water from my soaked tunic into the boot, mixed the soup thoroughly with my finger, and leaned closer to the dragon. Since her head lay tilted in the mud, I was able to pour a few green, glistening drops into her partly open mouth. As the drops struck her tongue, I waited for a swallow, but none came. Once again, I poured some of the potion out of my boot, and I waited, hoping for some sign, any sign of life. Yet she did not swallow, or stir, or moan. "Swallow!" I commanded, my voice echoing dully in the dark walls. I poured another few drops, which slid off her tongue and fell to the floor. Long after the last rays of twilight disappeared, and through the unforgiving night, I continued to try. My back ached, my bootless foot throbbed with cold, and my head swam from lack of sleep. Yet I refused to stop, hardly daring to hope that the eyelid might ever again flutter, that its orange glow might again illuminate the cavern, or that the dragon might actually swallow something. But my hopes came to nothing. When my herbal potion finally ran out, I tried rubbing the dragon's neck in slow circles, as my mother had done for me long ago. When I had thrashed from fever, it didn't help. Apart from the rare, halting breaths which grew more frail by the hour, she showed no sign of life at all. When the first tentative rays of dawn drifted into the cavern, I knew that all my efforts had failed. I studied the motionless form, appreciating the subtle beauty of the scales, the savage curl of the claws. The hatchling lay, utterly still, utterly silent. Glumly, I turned away. The feeling of this hollow now revolted me. Like the devastation across the river, it stank of untimely death. Heedless of whatever danger lay outside, I rolled through the curtain of wet grasses. Alrighty, my friends, that is the end of chapter 17, and tomorrow we will read chapter 18 called Veil of Mist. Thank you for joining me, and I hope you have a wonderful night. Bye.